I think Orwell played a bit at being working class, but I'm not sure. I mean, I think his aim going into the restaurants and becoming a tramp and going after the miners and the like was really to find things out. I think that was the basic reason why he went. He wanted to know what it was like to live, to be a human being and to live at that level of society rather than the level he'd lived at. And I don't think that's a especially bad thing. In fact, you know, I think it's really quite admirable, some of the things he did.
He didn't understand the working class, and you could understand it coming straight from a good bringing up where he'd never wanted anything in his life, except when he set out to get material for that book. He left Eton, and I don't suppose we'd be able to settle down to a life like the Eton people do. He did completely different background.
Well, I thought there was a lad after me on that. I'd like to go on tour with him, me.
He wrote The Road to Wigan Pier, which is one of the great works of our literature. I mean, it's still, when you read it today, it's an absolutely magnificent description, particularly of the miners and the life that the miners led, and how, as you go down the pit and see the way in which people work in conditions like that, you realize, just as he'd realized in Burma, what was happening to those people that he moved among, the people that he came, the Etonians and the like, that he moved among. They were simply robbing those miners. That was how they were able to conduct those comfortable lives in the South, is that they were robbing them. So that concept of robbery and the concept of lying about the robbery goes very much into The Road to Wigan Pier, which immediately made Orwell famous, 40,000 copies and the like.
Mais que qualquer outro, The Road to Wigan Pier, o mineiro pode talvez representar o tipo do trabalhador manual, não só porque o seu trabalho é tão exageradamente horrível, mas também porque é tão vital e, no entanto, tão longínquo à nossa experiência, tão invisível, que somos capazes de o esquecer, tal como esquecemos o sangue nas veias. De certo modo, é mesmo humilhante observar os mineiros a trabalhar. Levanta em nós uma dúvida momentânea sobre o nosso próprio estatuto de intelectuais e de pessoas, em geral, superior, pois faz-nos compreender, pelo menos enquanto os observamos, que é só porque os mineiros suam as estupinhas que as pessoas superiores podem continuar a ser superiores. The Road to Wigan Pier, 1937.
The Road to Wigan Pier forneceu a Orwell o dinheiro de que precisava para se instalar com Eileen, com quem casara a 9 de junho de 1936. Foi uma cerimónia simples, mas tradicional. Os recém-casados mudaram-se para uma vivenda arruinada em Wallington, Hertfordshire, onde Orwell se dedicou a viver frugalmente.
I think one of the secrets of Orwell is that he had an image of what he liked, which actually wasn't what he liked. His own personal life. You know, he thought he'd like to live in broken-down farmhouses in Hertfordshire, alone, you know, away from the rest of the world. But actually, he rather liked the rest of the world. So I think he devised the kind of life that he thought he ought to like, which he didn't really like. I mean, he was obsessed by being self-sufficient, having his own animals and that kind of thing. But I'm sure that, like so many people who pretend they're obsessed about these things, when it actually comes down to it, what they want is a good steak in a restaurant, really. I think there was part of him that very much liked the literary fame. He liked moving about in London literary circles and going to cafes and talking to people about books and so on. I mean, that's the sort of life he really liked to lead. But on the other hand, he did have very, very strong ideas, so the ideas often clashed with the kind of life he liked to lead. He liked to live a comfortable life talking to the literati, but on the other hand, he was really very worried about the rise of fascism in Europe, and Hitler, Franco, Mussolini, the great dictators of Europe, and particularly Franco in Spain, who had staged a revolution against a democratically elected government in Spain, and the two forces in Spain were locked, really, the forces of democracy and the forces of fascism.
Com 34 anos, Orwell partiu para lutar pela democracia em Espanha, chegando a Barcelona a 26 de dezembro de 1937. Aí entrou para o POUM, uma milícia socialista independente. A guerra deu-lhe um sentimento de integração. Ele apreciava a camaradagem entre os homens e a excitação da linha da frente.
I'm just outside Monte Escuri, near Alcubierre,
in February 1937, the English section of the volunteers to fight the fascists were assembled in the lines in these caves. There were about 30 of us, and there are about 4 or 5 to a cave. And his friend and commander, George Orwell, described it as a comic opera war where people occasionally got killed.
We were on guard. It was morning and dawn was coming up. Orwell was a very tall man, and he stood there and he was talking to us. In fact, myself and Tanky, who was somebody else who was with me, were sitting down on some sandbags, sort of just idly holding our rifles and having a chat with Orwell, who was guard commander at the time. He was talking, and of course it started to get light. Well, unfortunately, of course, he was silhouetted above the barricade, which was just a sandbag barricade, and there was a sudden shot, bang, down goes Orwell, and he was shot through the throat and carried away.
Após um mês de recuperação no hospital, Orwell foi ter com Eileen, que trabalhava agora em Barcelona como secretária para o Partido Trabalhista Independente. Esperando uma recepção de herói, Orwell ficou chocado ao constatar que ele e os amigos do POUM tinham sido apelidados de fascistas. Os agora poderosos comunistas, receosos da independência dos outros grupos revolucionários, tinham espalhado informações falsas junto da imprensa.
What he could see was that the communists were lying, if anything, lies about what was going on in society. In his book, Homage to Seed, as early as this, 1937, when he's writing this, he says, however much one cursed at the time, one realized afterwards that one had been in contact with something strange and valuable. That's being in contact with the people that were fighting liberty, where hope was more normal than apathy or cynicism, where the word comrade stood for comradeship and not, as in most countries, for humbug. One had breathed the air of equality. I'm well aware that it is now the fashion to deny that socialism has anything to do with equality. In every country in the world, a huge tribe of parks and secretly proving that socialism means no more than a planned state capitalism with the grab motive left intact. But fortunately, there also exists a vision of socialism quite different from this. The thing that attracts ordinary people to socialism and makes them willing to risk their skins for it, the mystique of socialism, is the idea of equality. For him to write in 1937 of the Russian society that it was a state capitalism with a grab motive left intact, that was miles ahead. Everybody now is prepared to say, oh, well, Russian communism was state capitalism. Lots of people say that now. Then that was miles ahead, right in my belief in the vanguard. He made himself tremendously unpopular with all the people on the left.
Em junho de 1937, após noites passadas escondidos nos bosques e nos pátios de igrejas, Orwell e Eileen conseguiram apanhar um comboio para a França. Daí regressaram a Londres. Orwell desanimado e desiludido, e não pouco, com a complacência revelada durante a guerra pelos políticos e pelo público de Inglaterra.
E depois a Inglaterra do Sul, provavelmente a paisagem mais adormecida do mundo. É difícil quando se lá passa, especialmente quando se convalesce pacificamente de uma doença marítima, rodeados de almofadas de pelúcia das carruagens do comboio costeiro, acreditar que alguma coisa se passe onde quer que seja. Tremores de terra no Japão, fome na China, revoluções no México. Não se preocupem, o leite estará mesmo à vossa porta amanhã de manhã, o New Statesman continuará a sair à sexta-feira, todos dormindo profundo sono inglês, do qual por vezes temo que nunca cheguemos a acordar até sermos sacudidos dele pelo troar das bombas. Homenagem à Catalunha, 1938.
Em setembro de 1939, a Inglaterra entrou na guerra. A princípio, Orwell opôs-se a ela, apostado em não ajudar um poder capitalista a conquistar a vitória. Mas não tardou a compreender que o fascismo era um mal ainda maior e embranhou-se totalmente no esforço de guerra. A má saúde impediu-o de combater e por isso alistou-se na BBC a trabalhar numa secção que emitia para a Índia, enquanto Eileen ajudava a escrever slogans de propaganda no Ministério da Alimentação.
All right, Montreal. Hello, BBC.
I think he thought that you could use propaganda machines to invent anything and to make people make speeches they hadn't ever made and so on. I remember he used to, I think he once tried to do, or toyed with the idea of taking little extracts from Winston's recorded speeches and have him declare peace. It's in the middle of war. He thought you could have done that. He certainly thought that propaganda machines are propaganda machines, and he didn't like being part of one. On the other hand, he accepted that a war required all this apparatus. But he was a strictly truthful person, and that everybody felt that with him. He didn't say anything he didn't mean exactly.
Orwell tornou-se também editor literário do Tribune e colaborador regular do Observer, ambos jornais de esquerda.
He talked, you see, always so freely, and it must have been, I'm sure it must have been, after he had said something, and I said to him, look, why don't you write this? And then we discussed it, and I suggested, and he said, yeah, yes, but will you print what I write? And then I said, look, you can write as you like, as you please. And from that, I think we got to the title. And then he started producing this extraordinary copy.